My wife came to me after 7 years of marriage and said, "Honey, we need a 2 week separation to test our marriage and see if we still truly love each other." I was completely shocked because our relationship had always been peaceful, without major fights or serious problems. She said we were stuck in a routine, that she had lost the passion, and that these 2 weeks of reflection without any contact would save our marriage. Since I always trusted her blindly and wanted to preserve our union, I ended up accepting this crazy proposal. You can't imagine what I discovered on the third day of this separation for reflection. Before continuing this story that will leave you outraged, subscribe to the channel and hit that like button because it's very important for YouTube's algorithm to know that you enjoy this type of real content. And tell me in the comments, would you accept a proposal for temporary separation from your spouse? Because after you hear this whole story of manipulation and betrayal, I'm sure you'll understand why I'll never trust anyone blindly again. What this woman did to me was the most low and calculated thing I've ever seen in my life. Get ready because the revenge I prepared for her was perfect. Let me give you some context about our story. My wife and I had been married for 7 years, since we met in engineering college. I was always a hardworking, dedicated guy who came home every day and treated her like a queen. Our routine was peaceful. I worked hard as a civil engineer at a big company, and she had a more flexible job at a digital marketing agency. We never had serious fights, there was never reason for suspicion, and I really believed we had a solid and happy marriage. That's why when she came with this talk about test separation, I was completely lost and couldn't understand where this idea came from. In the week leading up to this crazy proposal, I started noticing she was different. More on her phone, more distant, talking a lot about marriage routine and how we had lost spontaneity. I thought it was work stress or just woman stuff, you know how it is, and I didn't pay much attention to these signs. She started saying things like, "Do we still truly love each other?" and "Marriage can't just be obligation and habit." At the time, I thought she was being too philosophical, but now I know exactly what was behind all this acting. What I discovered later made me realize she had been planning this for much longer than I imagined. On the day she made the official proposal, she set up a whole dramatic scene in our living room, complete with a prepared speech and everything. "Honey, I love you, but I need to be sure if I still truly love you or if it's just habit after so many years together," she said, looking into my eyes with the biggest poker face. She explained that she wanted exactly 14 days of total separation, no WhatsApp contact, no calls, no social media, each of us on our own to reflect on the relationship. If we come back after these 14 days, it will be because we really chose to stay together, and our marriage will be stronger than ever, she said, with the conviction that convinced me on the spot. I, like a love-struck idiot, accepted, hoping this would really save our marriage. The rules she established for this test separation were very specific. She would stay at her mother's house, and I would stay at our house. 0 contact for 14 straight days. No looking at each other's social media to avoid contaminating the reflection. No talking to mutual friends about the subject. It needs to be pure reflection without external influences, she insisted. And I agreed with everything because I wanted it to work. She made a point to emphasize that it wasn't a real separation, just a reset in the relationship, and that on day 15 we would meet to talk about the future. That same day, she packed her bags, which were suspiciously too organized for someone who had the idea suddenly, and left the house. Little did I know I was being made a fool, and that on the third day, I would discover the most painful truth of my life. The first 2 days were the worst of my life. I really took this reflection story seriously and kept analyzing every moment of our marriage. I kept thinking, if I was a bad husband, if I didn't give enough attention, if I had really lost the romance. I even made a mental list of everything I could improve when she came back. Be more present, make more surprises, travel more together. I was genuinely willing to change everything to save our marriage because I believed she was going through a normal crisis of a long relationship. Meanwhile, I religiously respected all the rules she had established. I didn't look at her WhatsApp, didn't go on social media, didn't talk to any mutual friends about the subject. It needs to be pure reflection, without external influences, she insisted. And I was even feeling grateful for she had this genius idea of taking time to evaluate our relationship. I thought, what an intelligent woman, always thinking about the well-being of our marriage. I was even planning how I'd win her back when we return, what romantic places I would take her to dinner, what special gift I would give to celebrate our new beginning. In my head, as a loving husband, I was already imagining how happy we would be after this conjugal growth experience. It was incredible how I could be naive to this extent, transforming betrayal into virtue in my own mind. But on the third day, reality hit my head like a hammer, and I discovered what kind of reflection she was really doing.
On the third day, a Friday I'll never forget, I was on the couch at home trying to distract myself with Netflix when I decided to take a quick look at Instagram. Not at her profile, but just to see other things. When I opened the app, the first thing that appeared on my feed was a story from my own wife. She was at an expensive restaurant that I always wanted to take her to, all dressed up, smiling radiantly, with another man. My heart stopped at that moment, and my hands started shaking when I saw that she had posted not only this story, but several others, showing a perfect day with a guy I recognized as her ex-boyfriend from college. The caption on one of the photos said, "Rediscovering happiness is wonderful." At that instant, I understood that the last 7 years of my life had been a lie. Can you imagine the shock of realizing that my wife wasn't reflecting on our marriage at all, but was living a honeymoon with another guy? I kept staring at those photos like an idiot, trying to process what I was seeing while my world completely collapsed. She was using our test separation as an official license to cheat, a perfect excuse to be with another man without feeling guilty. The pure reflection without external influences was actually her enjoying life as if she were single, posting romantic photos with another guy as if I didn't exist. At that moment, a rage I had never felt in my life rose through my body, but at the same time, a calculating coldness took over me. If she wanted to play dirty, I was going to play even better. From that moment on, something completely changed inside me. I stopped being the naive and passionate husband and became a determined investigator. I stopped suffering and started planning because I realized she had completely underestimated me. She thought I would stay home crying and blaming myself while she enjoyed 2 weeks of officialized cheating. But she didn't count on me discovering everything on the third day and having 11 complete days to prepare for the confrontation. I decided I would use exactly the time she gave me to gather all possible evidence of the betrayal and prepare a revenge she would never forget. From then on, every step I took would be calculated to ensure she paid dearly for making me a fool. In the following days, I transformed into a real private detective, documenting her every move through social media that she thought I wasn't watching. She continued posting stories and photos as if she were a single woman rediscovering life, always with the same guy I now knew was Carlos, her ex-boyfriend from college days. They went to expensive restaurants, luxury hotels, clubs, movies, a real honeymoon funded with money from our marriage. The most revolting thing was seeing how radiant and happy she was, as if she had been freed from a prison when she was actually destroying 7 years of a life built together. But she didn't know that every photo she posted was becoming evidence against her and that I was building a complete dossier of the betrayal. I decided to also investigate the financial side of the betrayal, so I accessed our joint account and credit card to see how she was funding her new and free life. You won't believe it. She was spending our money that I earned working, to pay for romantic dinners, hotels, and gifts for her lover. In just 5 days, she had already spent more than $1,200 on expensive restaurants, a 4-star hotel downtown, and even purchases in women's lingerie stores. Every receipt I saw was a stab in the chest, but at the same time, fuel for my revenge. She was literally using my money to cheat on me, thinking I was too stupid to find out. I printed all the receipts and kept everything in a folder that would be very useful on the day of reckoning. The more I investigated, the more I realized that this test separation wasn't a sudden idea. It was a plan elaborated for a long time. I started remembering signs I ignored in recent months. Her mentioning Carlos by chance in some conversations, saying she had run into him at the mall, that he had moved back to the city. Now everything made sense. She had been rediscovering her relationship with him for months, and the separation was just a way to officialize the betrayal without taking the blame. The most revolting thing was realizing how she had emotionally manipulated me, making me agree to be cheated on with my own consent. She was so cynical that she managed to transform betrayal into couples therapy. Every memory that came back to my mind only increased my determination to do justice. I decided to investigate further and discreetly talk to some neighbors, pretending concern about her absence. Mrs. Marlene, the neighbor next door, told me she saw my wife leaving the house on the first day with 2 large suitcases, but that on Tuesday, 4th day, she came back to get more clothes, accompanied by a dark-haired man who waited in the car. "I thought it was your brother," she said, not knowing she was giving me more evidence of the betrayal. The building superintendent also told me that he received a noise complaint about our apartment one night when I wasn't there. She had brought the guy to our own home. With each new piece of information, I realized how shameless and disrespectful she had been, using our home for meetings with her lover.
What revolted me most was the total hypocrisy of her social media posts during our sacred separation. While she had convinced me that we needed time without distractions for pure reflection, she was posting stories practically every day showing her new life. Phrases like, "Life is too short not to be happy," "Rediscovering who I am has been liberating," and "Gratitude for special people who come into our lives" appeared constantly on her social media. She was literally documenting the betrayal and still philosophizing about it, as if she were going through a spiritual awakening instead of destroying a marriage. Each post was a slap in my face, but I saved everything as evidence. And the worst was yet to come, because on the 8th day, I discovered something that made me even angrier. I started investigating the history of their relationship on social media and discovered that they had been talking for at least 3 months before the test separation. I found likes and discreet comments from him on her photos since January, and I noticed that she started posting more sensual photos exactly when he reappeared in her life. They had developed their own language of public flirting. He would comment "beautiful," and she would respond with heart emojis. He would like all her photos within minutes. Looking with the eyes of someone who knows about the betrayal, it was obvious they had been relating emotionally for a long time. The separation was just the moment she chose to make physical what had been emotional for months. I was being betrayed for much longer than I imagined. The most painful moment of this entire discovery was when I found in Google Photos, which was synced with her phone, some photos she had taken but not posted. They were intimate images of the two of them, selfies in bed, photos in hotel showers, moments that clearly showed a consolidated physical relationship. Seeing my wife, the woman I loved and respected for 7 years, in these situations with another man was like taking a punch to the stomach. For a few minutes, I thought about giving up on revenge and just disappearing from her life. I was so destroyed. But then the anger came back with full force because I realized she didn't deserve even a drop of consideration from me. If she was capable of betraying me with this coldness and still documenting everything, I would be capable of returning the favor. I decided I wasn't going to settle for just emotional revenge. I wanted her to pay legally too. I sought out a lawyer specializing in family law and brought all the evidence I had collected: screenshots from social media, expense receipts, photos, neighbor testimonies. You have enough material for a litigious divorce with exclusive fault on her part, the lawyer told me, explaining that this meant she would lose the right to half the assets and could even have to pay compensation for moral damages. I also discovered that the expenses she made with our joint money to fund the betrayal could be considered embezzlement. It was exactly what I wanted to hear. She was going to pay dearly for underestimating me. With 4 days left until her triumphant return, I started planning how the confrontation would be. I knew she would come back full of beautiful speeches about how the separation had been good, about how she had reflected and decided she loved me, about how our marriage would come out stronger from this experience. She probably expected to find me needy and grateful for her return, ready to accept any crumb of attention she gave me. But I had a very different surprise prepared for her. I organized all the evidence in a physical and digital folder, prepared the divorce papers, and chose the perfect moment to reveal that I had known everything since the third day. The reaction she would have when she discovered she had been caught red-handed was going to be priceless. In the last days before her return, I finalized all preparations for the moment of truth. I transferred all my money to an individual account, canceled the joint cards, changed the passwords of all shared accounts, and even changed the house lock. After all, she didn't live there anymore. I prepared a presentation on my laptop with all the evidence organized chronologically, from Carlos's first likes to the intimate photos she had taken during our sacred separation. Each piece of evidence was cataloged with date, time, and context. I also printed all the receipts for the expenses she made with my money to fund the betrayal. It was a complete and irrefutable dossier of the most hypocritical betrayal anyone can commit. On the eve of the day scheduled for our conversation about the future, I was completely prepared for the confrontation. I even chose the outfit I would wear, a blue dress shirt that she always said looked beautiful on me, because I wanted her to remember how she had lost a good husband. I organized the house so that everything was perfect, as if I was really expecting a romantic reconciliation. The evidence was hidden, but strategically positioned for the right moment. I knew she would arrive with flowers, apologies, and promises, hoping I would fall for her manipulation once again. But this time, the game had turned, and she had no idea what was waiting for her.
During these 11 days of investigation and preparation, I went through a complete psychological transformation. I stopped being the naive victim and became someone who knew the true character of the person I was married to. I no longer felt pain, just a calculating coldness and a thirst for justice that motivated me to move forward. I had cried in the first days, but now I only felt determination. She was going to discover that she had completely underestimated my intelligence and my capacity to react. The man she left at home was not the same one she would find upon return. I was prepared to definitively end this farce she called marriage. On the morning of day 15, the day of our reunion, I woke up with a strange feeling of calm and expectation. I knew that in a few hours I would be face to face with the person who had betrayed me in the most cowardly way possible, using my own trust against me. I had coffee calmly, tidied the house, put on ambient music, everything to create the perfect setting for what was to come. At 6 p.m., she would arrive with her performance as a renewed wife. But at 6:05 p.m., she would discover that her plan had backfired since the third day. I was anxious to see her face when she realized she had dug her own grave. The truth is, I had never felt so confident and in control of a situation in my life. Exactly at 6 p.m., as agreed, she rang the doorbell of our house, or rather, my house, since she had chosen not to live there anymore. When I opened the door, she had a bouquet of flowers, a radiant smile, and a new dress that she had probably bought with my money during her adventures with Carlos. "Hi, honey, I missed you so much," she said, giving me a kiss on the cheek and entering as if nothing had happened. I responded to the greeting normally, offered her something to drink, asked how the 2 weeks had been. She began the rehearsed speech about how the separation had been enlightening, how she was sure now that she truly loved me, how our marriage would come out stronger. I listened to everything with a smile on my face, knowing that in a few minutes this farce would come to an end. "Honey, these 2 weeks away from you made me realize how important you are in my life," she began, playing the role of repentant wife with impressive naturalness. She talked about how she had spent the days reflecting on our relationship, about how she had realized that routine wasn't a problem, but rather proof of stability. "I didn't talk to anyone, I didn't leave my mother's house, it was just me and my thoughts," she lied shamelessly, looking into my eyes as if she were the most sincere person in the world. She continued saying she had planned several changes to make our marriage more interesting, that she wanted to travel with me, do new things together. Every word that came out of her mouth was a lie, and she knew it, but she kept acting as if she were the greatest actress in the world. I let her finish the entire renewed wife speech, agreeing with everything and even pretend emotion. "It's good to know you use that time to think about us," I replied, holding back the urge to laugh at her audacity.
I asked how it had been staying in her mother's house, if she had taken advantage to rest, if she had done anything different. She continued lying. I didn't do anything much, just morning walks, reading, lots of reflection. While she spoke, I thought about the photos I had seen of her at expensive restaurants, luxury hotels, and in bed with another man. The ability to lie looking into my eyes was impressive, but I knew that in a few minutes all this acting would end. After patiently listening to her entire performance for more than 20 minutes, I got up and said, "Darling, I also have something to show you about these 2 weeks." I took my laptop and positioned it on the living room coffee table right in front of her. "Since you talked so much about reflection and sincerity, I want to share some reflections I also had," I said, with a smile she couldn't decipher. I opened the folder with all the evidence organized and said, "Well, let me start by showing how your first few days of pure reflection went." The expression on her face began to change when she saw the first photo of her with Carlos on the computer screen. It was at that moment that she realized the game had completely turned. "This photo here is from the 3rd day of our separation," I said calmly, showing the image of her at the expensive restaurant with Carlos. "Interesting reflection method, isn't it? Very intimate and accompanied." She turned white as a sheet and started stuttering. I can explain, it's not what you're thinking." But I continued scrolling through the photos. Her at the hotel, her shopping, her posting happy stories. "And this one here is from the 5th day. You look very reflective indeed, especially in the intimate part of the reflection." With each image I showed, she became more desperate, trying to invent increasingly pathetic excuses. "He's just a friend. It was just a casual meeting. You're interpreting it wrong." I let her get tangled in her own lies before showing the next block of evidence.
Now let's talk about how you funded this reflection, I said, showing all the expense receipts she made with our joint money. $150 for the romantic dinner on the 4th day, $110 for Thursday's hotel, $60 at the lingerie store, all very reflective indeed. She tried to justify, "I had the right to use the money, it's mine too," but I cut her off immediately. "Of course it's your right to spend our money on another man while making me a fool, right, darling?" I showed the total, $1,200 in 1 week financing the betrayal. You know this can be considered embezzlement, right? Using couples' money to fund adultery can mean jail time. The look of desperation on her face was worth every second of humiliation she put me through. But the best part is knowing that this test separation wasn't a sudden idea, it was a premeditated plan, I continued, showing the history of her interactions with Carlos since January. "Look here, comments from him on your photos 3 months ago, systematic likes, public flirting. You had been relating emotionally for months, right?" She tried to deny, but I had screenshots of everything. The separation for reflection was just an excuse for you to officialize the betrayal without feeling guilty. I showed the intimate photos she had taken and forgotten in Google Photos. Very physical reflection, isn't it? At this moment, she broke down and started crying. But it wasn't tears of repentance, it was desperation of someone caught red-handed who knew there was no way to lie anymore. When she realized that I had evidence of everything, photos, expenses, testimonies, complete history of the betrayal, she went into total panic. She started crying and begging, "Please forgive me, it was just a phase, I truly love you." She tried to hug me, but I pulled away in disgust. "You don't understand, he deceived me, manipulated me, I was confused," she said, as if I would believe that a 30-year-old woman was manipulated by an ex-boyfriend. The most pathetic part was when she tried to blame me. "You haven't been giving me attention. I felt lonely in the marriage." Every excuse she invented only confirmed that I was right to end everything. But I hadn't finished showing all the surprises I had prepared for her yet. "Since you like planning things so much, let me show you what I planned for you," I said, taking the folder with the divorce papers. "Here's the litigious divorce petition with exclusive fault on your part based on all this evidence of adultery." I explained that this meant you would lose the right to half the assets, would have to return the money she spent with her lover, and could even have to pay compensation for moral damages. My lawyer said it's one of the best documented cases of betrayal he's ever seen. Her face of terror when she realized I had prepared legally was priceless. "You thought I would stay home crying while you had fun, right? Well, you completely underestimated me." Oh, and just so you know, these 2 weeks you gave me were very useful for other things too, I continued with satisfaction. I canceled all the joint cards, transferred my money to an individual account, changed the passwords of all shared accounts. I took the new lock key and showed it to her. And I changed the lock too. After all, you don't live here anymore, right? You were the one who decided to leave home. She tried to argue that she had the right to enter her own house, but I cut her off. Your house now is in Carlos's bed. You chose that yourself. With each practical revelation, she realized that I had used exactly the time she gave me to protect myself completely. While you were playing house with someone else, I was making sure you wouldn't destroy anything else in my life. But the best part was yet to come. You know what impresses me most about this whole story? I asked, closing the laptop with all the evidence. You were so arrogant that you documented your own betrayal on social media, thinking I was too stupid to find out. I explained how I discovered everything on the 3rd day and how I used the remaining 11 days to prepare. You handed me on a silver platter exactly what I needed to finish you. I showed how you dug your own grave. If you had broken up with me before betraying me, you would have kept half of everything. But since you chose to deceive me and still use my money to fund the betrayal, you're leaving with nothing. The irony of the situation was perfect. The separation to save the marriage had become the perfect weapon to destroy her. At that moment, she realized she had lost everything: the marriage, the assets, dignity, and on top of that would face a legal process. She tried one last desperate move. Please, we can talk. We can try again. I promise I will never again. But I was already standing, walking toward the door. There is nothing more to talk about. You had 14 days to reflect and chose to betray me. Now you'll have the rest of your life to reflect on the consequences. I opened the door and said, you can leave my house, and you can take the flowers. You'll need them to decorate the mess your life has become. The last thing I saw was her leaving destroyed, carrying the bouquet she brought for a reconciliation that was never going to happen. But the consequences of this betrayal went far beyond what she imagined.
In the following days, the damage to her life was even greater than I had planned. Since she had publicly posted the entire betrayal on social media, it didn't take long for friends and family to discover the truth. Her mother, who always treated me like a son, was furious when she learned that her daughter had destroyed a stable marriage over a whim. Mutual friends started taking sides, and obviously they sided with me when they saw the evidence of manipulation. Carlos, who thought he was the conqueror, disappeared when he realized the fun adventure had become a legal and social problem. She tried to call me several times, but I had blocked all contacts. The woman who left home thinking she would have 2 weeks of guaranteed fun discovered she had lost a lifetime of construction. 3 months later, the divorce process was going perfectly in my favor. Since I had irrefutable evidence of the betrayal, she couldn't contest anything. She lost the right to alimony, to half the assets, and still had to return $1,200 she spent with her lover. Money she didn't have because she had lost her job after the story spread in the work environment. The apartment we bought together stayed with me. The car stayed with me. The savings stayed with me. She moved to a small rented apartment and had to restart her life from scratch at 30 years old. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding my life, stronger and smarter, knowing exactly how to identify fake people. The test separation she created to deceive me ended up being the best gift she could have given me. Looking back, I can say this was the most painful and at the same time most liberating experience of my life. I discovered I was married to a person I didn't really know, someone capable of emotionally manipulating me to get what she wanted. But I also discovered my own strength and intelligence to deal with extreme situations. The revenge I executed wasn't out of malice, it was for justice. She needed to understand that actions have consequences and that underestimating people can be very expensive. I learned that trusting doesn't mean being naive, and that when someone shows who they really are, we have to believe them. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes what seems like the end of the world is actually the beginning of a better life. Today, 2 years later, I can say that test separation was the best thing that happened in my life.
I got rid of a fake and manipulative person and learned to value relationships based on honesty and mutual respect. She did me a huge favor by showing her true character before we had children or built even more things together. And you? What do you think of this story? Did I make the right choice accepting the test separation, or should I have been suspicious from the beginning? Leave your opinions in the comments and subscribe to the channel because next week I'm going to tell the story of a guy who discovered his wife had a parallel family for 5 years, and his revenge was even more epic than mine. Don't miss it because these real stories of betrayal and revenge show that justice always prevails in the end.